So we've got a number of Pacific Division Western Canadian team things to talk about, starting with the latest on Darnell Nurse and the Oilers, as well as some Vancouver Canucks related notes as it pertains to top prospects like Caleb Malhotra and maybe even Keaton Verhoff. You know what? Let's save the Darnell Nurse stuff for later because this is actually pretty big. Turns out the Oilers will be kicking the tires on a Darnell Nurse trade. At least that's what it seems like heading into the next little while here. But I wanted to start out our conversation by talking about Canucks draft talk and Caleb Malhotra, the son of new Vancouver Canucks head coach Manny Malhotra, and a guy whom we've all had in this bubble as a potential Vancouver Canucks draft pick over the next few weeks. It just depends on what direction the Canucks go at the third overall spot. But Manny Malhotra is the head coach of the team. Caleb Malhotra, while it's true he's not going to be an NHL player immediately, he is going to go to Boston University first and foremost. There were concerns from many, myself included, as to whether or not the father and son dynamic was actually appropriate in the NHL. Say what you want about Adam and Dave Lowry, but Caleb and Manny Malhotra are kind of in a different spot here. With that said, you have Thomas Drance, who tweeted this out earlier today. Caleb Malhotra says that him and his dad will be professional in the event the Vancouver Canucks select him with the third overall pick. But he also admits it would be pretty special. He adds, it was funny when he interviewed with Vancouver this week, and then got a call from his dad asking how it went. You see, that's just kind of how weird it feels, right? The Vancouver Canucks are doing their interviews, they're having their dinners, they're talking with Stenberg, McKenna, Malhotra, Reed, all these guys, right? But then it's like, hey, Caleb Malhotra just interviewed with the Vancouver Canucks. All of a sudden you have the head coach of the team calling the guy like, hey, how'd it go? What did my bosses say to you? Like, I don't know. It feels more weird as the days go on, in my opinion at least. You can let me know your thoughts if you feel any odd feelings about that. The Twitter thread goes out there and has even more responses from people. Uncle Elite said, oh, he probably told his son to order the least expensive items on the menu in order to impress Aquilini and guarantee that they draft him. Drafting Caleb over Stenberg would ruin any goodwill Ryan Johnson has built. Not only would be challenging between Caleb and Manny, but it'll always be something teammates think about. Teammates won't feel comfortable talking truthfully about the coach in front of Caleb. Just don't do it. Having sons myself, Paul says, I totally see how cool this might seem for Manny and Caleb. However, I think the downside would far outweigh the upside. Manny would never be able to make a decision regarding his son without being brutally second-guessed by the media and fans. Yeah, they're definitely drafting him, LOL. Now, for what it's worth, Rick Dhaliwal did say earlier today, or was it earlier yesterday? It was one of the two, that he does feel like if the Canucks were to make the choice today, they'd take Malhotra. And that aligns essentially with everything we've been hearing over the past few weeks. Whether or not this new regime of the Sedins and Ryan Johnson is actually as high on Malhotra as the previous regime was of Alvin and Rutherford, that remains to be seen. But regardless, the Caleb and Manny relationship being put into question, I do think that is valid, and it's something that Canucks fans are going to have to get used to over the next little while, but I'm not saying they have to accept it so easily, right? Like, there are things that you can doubt about it. I think that's fair. Meanwhile, you also had this that was said by Satyr Shah, speaking about fans and their ideas on social media. Shah said there were too many things that distracted the former leadership group with the Canucks. Things that would bother them. Things that would get under their skin. Things that fans and media would say on social media would circulate the room. Now, if I'm reading the Satyr Shah quote correctly, does that mean that gosh darn Vancouver Canucks players were going on to Twitter, they were going on to social media, they were potentially going on to YouTube to get their scoops on what's going on with their team? If that's the case, then goodness gracious, thank gosh this new regime is in, trying to change the culture and trying to change the standard of discourse that goes around this team. Are you telling me the Vancouver Canucks and their leadership group, the guys that should be at the very top of dictating the culture and the player dynamics, they were bothered by what people were going out there and saying on Twitter? Come on, man. You're an NHL team. I get that the entire reason you exist and your jobs are put in place is to entertain people, but at some point, there's got to be a disconnection between the way the fans think and the way the players feel about themselves. There should not be any correlation with that. That is just wild. Yeah, ownership is complete ass, but I think the JR and Alvin tenure is going to look worse and worse as the years go on. Patches, the Great One, says. Sad but true. When they came in after Benning, I thought, finally, here we go. Soon after, though, it was the Bruce Boudreau debacle, which most of this market somehow gave them a pass for. But then came mistake after mistake. Not the least of which was falling into the same trap that Benning and ownership were stuck in for years, thinking this roster was closer than they were. And then, of course, the whole win for Quinn phase, even though apparently they knew he wasn't coming back. Yeah, it's that, it's the social media, it's the fans getting under the skin of the players. That's just really inappropriate, I feel. Now, I know I'm saying that immediately after talking about Caleb and Manny and how fans have the right to be questioning of that dynamic, but I think it's a little bit different here. It's like, yeah, fans don't necessarily know if this is the right move. And even though Caleb's going out there and saying that, yeah, we'll be professional about it, there is room for doubt. Until we see it, we don't have an idea as to how it's going to go, right? Speaking of which, Caleb Malhotra also went out there and said this at the Combine. A team asked him, oh, by the way, big shout out over to Kathy Grenier for subscribing to the channel whilst recording this video. That's awesome. Malhotra says a team asked him in a Combine interview if he was on a desert island with no fresh water for a day, but the person next to him had a water bottle, would he kill that person for their water bottle? Yeah, these Combine questions never cease to amaze me. Let's shift gears over onto some Edmonton Oilers talk, because we have some updates on the Darnell Nurse trade front, as posted about by NHL Rumor Report. Take a look at this. It's from yesterday's fourth period segment with David Pagnotta regarding the Darnell Nurse situation. Sources have told the fourth period that Darnell is open to a trade to the right environment. Even though his presence is to stay in Edmonton, it is now likely that Nurse is dealt sometime this off-season. So there we go. Darnell Nurse is open to a trade. This is what we have been mentioning over the past few years, it seems. It's the new standard for NHL players and guys with trade protection. Darnell Nurse has a full no move this season and for next season. But whenever players enter the trade market, whenever players start hearing their name on social media, on mainstream media, on the radio, on podcasts, once they start hearing themselves as tossed out there into trade rumors, and then once the team approaches them and says, hey, can you waive? It seems like nowadays, maybe 8 out of 10 times, the player decides, okay, sure, fine, I'll waive. I have this right to control where I go or to stay in Edmonton, but you want me out? Okay, fine, I'll get out. I'd rather go somewhere where I'm valued rather than stick around with an organization that genuinely asked me if I wanted to leave. We see some situations sometimes, like Tyler Myers, for example, where the player does actually have a pretty big say on where it is they go. Dallas was the only team that Tyler Myers was seemingly interested to go to, which is why he got sent over there. It's just coincidental that I guess the Stars were interested in Myers at the same time. But long gone are the days where Louis Eriksson, for example, rejected a trade to Edmonton and decided to stick around in Vancouver despite the fact that he knew that the Oilers wanted him and that Vancouver didn't. Darnell Nurse, Andrei Kuzmenko, these are guys that we have seen over the past little while legitimately say, all right, sorry, I don't want to be here anymore if you don't want me here, so I'm okay with getting traded. So for Darnell, it seems like we'll have to wait and see where it is he'll end up and who will take his $2.5 million AAV contract, which goes on till 2030. What an albatross of a deal. Maybe Nurse goes over to the Maple Leafs for Morgan Riley or whatever. Who knows? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about this Darnell Nurse trade update and the Caleb, Manny, Louis situation with the Vancouver Canucks? Thoughts on the Caleb and Manny Malhotra dynamic and where that's going to go over the next little while. I hope you enjoyed this video. Sign on, and bye.